My best friend stole my husband, so I made her regret everything. I'm not proud of what I did. If you ask me today whether I regret it, my answer is, I honestly don't know. Some people will probably say I crossed the line. Others will tell me my best friend deserved every second of what happened to her. All I know is that the woman who destroyed my marriage ended up destroying her own life chasing a man who never even existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Emily. I'm 34, and until about a year ago, I thought I had the kind of life people secretly wish they had. I lived in Seattle with my husband, Ryan. We'd been married for almost 8 years, together for 11, no kids yet. We kept saying we'd start trying next year, but next year always became another next year. Ryan owned a small construction company, and I worked as an interior designer. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We traveled once or twice a year, had a beautiful house, and spent weekends hosting barbecues with friends. Looking back now, I think I ignored every warning sign because I wanted to believe my life was exactly as perfect as it looked. And then there was Jessica. Jessica Moore, my best friend since middle school. We met when we were 12 after another girl made fun of my braces. Jessica walked over, dumped chocolate milk all over that girl's backpack, grabbed my hand, and said, "Come on, we're leaving." That was the beginning of a friendship that lasted more than 20 years. She was there when my parents divorced. She helped me move into my first apartment. She held my hair when I got food poisoning in college. She was my maid of honor at my wedding. When Ryan proposed, Jessica cried harder than I did. Everyone used to joke that she was basically part of our family. Honestly, she was. She had her own key to our house. She came over whenever she wanted. Sometimes I'd come home from work and she'd already be sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee with Ryan while waiting for me. I never questioned it. Why would I? She was Jessica. If anything, I trusted her more than I trusted most of my own relatives. The funny thing about betrayal is that it never starts the day you catch someone. It starts months, maybe years, before that. You just don't notice until it's too late. Thinking back, there were little moments. Ryan laughing just a little too hard at her jokes. Jessica texting him instead of texting me. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Her bringing his favorite beer instead of mine. The way she'd hug him just a second longer than necessary. Tiny things. Things your brain immediately explains away because you can't imagine the people you love lying to your face. I remember one night, maybe 6 months before everything fell apart. The three of us were watching a movie. I got up to make popcorn. When I came back, they stopped talking. I asked what was so funny. Ryan smiled. "Oh, nothing?" Jessica looked down at her phone. It was stupid. That should have bothered me. Instead, I sat down and forgot about it 5 minutes later. Looking back, I hate how trusting I was, or maybe trusting isn't the right word. Maybe I was just comfortable. Comfort makes you blind. A few weeks later, Jessica started coming over even more often. She'd say she was stressed from work, or lonely, or just needed to get out of her apartment. Ryan always told her she was welcome. Again, nothing seemed strange. Until one Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't dramatic. There was no lipstick on a collar, no hotel receipt, no mysterious phone call, just an iPad sitting on our kitchen counter. Ryan had left early for a meeting. He forgot the iPad. I only picked it up because it kept buzzing every few seconds. I figured it was work. I wanted to silence it. Instead, I saw Jessica's name and the preview of a message. Last night was worth every lie. I remember staring at those 6 words, waiting for my brain to explain them. It never did. My hands started shaking. I told myself there had to be some innocent explanation. Maybe they were planning a surprise, maybe it was a joke, maybe... I unlocked the screen. Ryan had never hidden his passcode from me. What I found over the next 5 minutes completely destroyed the life I thought I had. And somehow, that wasn't even the worst part. I wish I could tell you I slammed the iPad shut the second I realized what I was looking at. I didn't. I kept reading, message after message, photo after photo. Every excuse Ryan had given me over the previous 6 months suddenly made perfect sense. Working late, he was with Jessica. Client dinner, Jessica. Guys' weekend, Jessica. Every lie had one thing in common, her. The messages weren't just about sex. Honestly, I almost wish they had been. That would have been easier. No, they were talking about me. That was the part that actually broke me. Jessica wrote, "I almost laughed when Emily thanked me for always being there for her." Ryan replied, "Just a little longer. She still has no clue." Then another message. "Do you think she'll let you keep the house?" Ryan answered with a laughing emoji. "She's too nice. She won't fight me." I felt sick, not because they were sleeping together, because they'd turned my entire life into a joke. I kept scrolling. Jessica complained about having to pretend to comfort me whenever Ryan worked late. Ryan joked that I was predictable. They rated my cooking, made fun of the sweaters I wore around the house, even laughed about the birthday gift I'd spent weeks making for Jessica by hand. 22 years of friendship. Reduced to entertainment, I don't know how long I stood there. 10 minutes, maybe 30. Time didn't exist anymore. Then I heard a car pull into the driveway. Ryan. Without thinking, I locked the iPad exactly the way I'd found it and put it back on the counter. By the time he walked inside, I was sitting at the kitchen island pretending to answer emails. He smiled. "Kinda quiet in here." I looked up. For the first time in 11 years, I saw a stranger. He leaned over and kissed my forehead. I had to force myself not to flinch. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." "You look tired." "I didn't sleep well." He nodded like he actually cared. Then he grabbed the iPad. My heart stopped. Would he notice? Would he realize I'd seen everything? He unlocked it, looked at the screen, smiled for half a second, then put it into his backpack. No, he had no idea. For the rest of the day, I acted completely normal. I made dinner, asked about his meeting, watched TV beside him, even laughed at one of his stupid jokes. Inside, I was planning, not revenge. Not yet. I needed proof. Real proof. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Ryan left around 8. 10 minutes later, Jessica parked outside my house. She didn't know my bedroom overlooked the driveway. I watched her get out of her car wearing sunglasses and carrying a grocery bag. She looked around before walking to my front door. She didn't knock. She used her key. My key, the one I'd given her years ago because she was family. I waited exactly 30 seconds before walking downstairs. I quietly opened the garage door and slipped inside through the laundry room. The house was silent. Then I heard laughing. Our laughing. Coming from the kitchen. I stood behind the hallway wall and listened. Jessica giggled. I thought she'd never leave. Ryan laughed. She's at work. She almost caught us yesterday. I know. A pause, then Jessica asked the question that changed everything. So, when are you finally telling her? Ryan sighed. I need to wait. Why? Because if I leave now, she'll probably make the divorce ugly. Jessica sounded annoyed. I hate pretending to be her friend. Ryan chuckled. Not much longer. Then, Jessica said something I'll never forget. Honestly, I should have stolen you years ago. Neither of them laughed, because neither of them thought it was a joke. I quietly backed away before they could hear me. I got into my car, drove 3 blocks, pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot, and completely fell apart. I cried harder than I ever have in my entire life. Not graceful crying, ugly crying, the kind where you can't breathe, the kind where your chest physically hurts. For almost an hour, I sat there asking myself the same question. How long? How long had they been lying to me? 6 months? A year? Longer? Eventually, my phone rang. Jessica. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then she texted. Hey! Just checking on you, hope you're feeling better. I actually laughed. A real laugh, because the audacity was unbelievable. She was texting me from my own kitchen while sleeping with my husband. That's when something inside me changed. I stopped crying, wiped my face, looked at myself in the rearview mirror, and made one decision. Ryan could have Jessica. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to compete for a man capable of doing this, but Jessica had spent months enjoying my pain without me even knowing. She thought she was smarter than me. She thought she'd won. She had a... For the next 2 weeks, I became the best actress of my life. Ryan still kissed me goodbye every morning. Jessica still texted me almost every day. Miss you. Let's grab lunch soon. Love you, girl. Every message made my stomach turn, but I answered every single one, normally, cheerfully. Like, I didn't know they were laughing at me behind my back. People always ask why I didn't confront them immediately. Simple. Because confrontation would have given them exactly what they wanted. Drama, crying, a messy divorce. Instead, I watched, I listened, I collected everything. Screenshots, bank statements, photos, security camera footage from our front door, even the dates Ryan claimed he was out of town. By the end of those 2 weeks, I had enough evidence to bury any lie they could tell. Then something happened that changed my entire plan. I wasn't looking for revenge. Not really. Until Jessica accidentally gave me the perfect opportunity. We were having coffee at our favorite little cafe downtown. Yes, I still met her. She had no idea I already knew everything. She spent 20 minutes pretending to care about my life before steering the conversation toward herself. I think I'm done dating broke guys, she sighed dramatically. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? I want someone successful for once. You mean someone with a stable job? She laughed. No. She leaned closer. I mean rich. I almost smiled. Instead, I stirred my coffee. Rich how? Like, stupid rich. She started counting on her fingers. Private jet rich. Penthouse rich. Yacht rich. I don't want another average guy. I looked at her. Doesn't personality matter? She actually rolled her eyes. Emily. Personality doesn't buy houses in Malibu. Then she laughed. I know it sounds shallow. No. It sounded honest. For the first time in years. Jessica wasn't pretending. She continued talking. If I ever met a millionaire who actually liked me, I'd disappear tomorrow. I nodded slowly. That sentence stayed in my head all day. By the time I got home, the idea had already begun forming. It sounded ridiculous, completely unrealistic, the kind of thing you'd laugh about after a glass of wine. But the more I thought about it, the more possible it seemed. That night, while Ryan slept beside me, I opened my laptop. I didn't search for divorce lawyers. I didn't search for private investigators. Instead, I created a new email address, then an Instagram account, then a LinkedIn profile, then a Facebook page. One name appeared at the top of every profile. Adrian Black, 42 years old, technology investor, recently moved between Miami and New York, never married, no children, liked sailing, collected vintage watches, supported animal charities. Everything was carefully chosen. Not flashy, believable. I knew one thing about Jessica. If the profile looked fake, she'd never bite. So I spent days building Adrian's life. I found royalty-free photos of luxury hotels, pictures of expensive restaurants, a few shots from yacht rental companies, beautiful city skylines. Nothing that screamed fake, just enough to suggest a wealthy lifestyle. Then I waited. A week later, when I made Adrian follow Jessica, nothing happened. Another 3 days passed, still nothing. Then, one evening, she followed him back. I smiled. The next morning, Adrian liked one of her photos, not the newest one. One from almost 8 months earlier. People notice that. It feels intentional. Jessica liked one of Adrian's pictures back within 5 minutes. Interesting. I still didn't message her. Instead, Adrian disappeared again. 2 days later, Jessica watched every single Instagram story. Everyone. She even liked a picture of a sunset. Hook set. Now I just needed her to bite. 3 nights later, at exactly 9:14 p.m., Adrian finally sent his first message. Just 6 words. Beautiful photo, Seattle looks nice. Nothing flirty, nothing creepy, nothing desperate. I closed the laptop. Now the waiting began. About 20 minutes later, Jessica replied. Thanks. Have you ever been here? I stared at her message, then over at Ryan, who was sitting on the couch beside me watching a baseball game. He had no idea that would. The woman he'd destroyed my marriage for had just taken the first step toward ruining her own life. And somehow, this was only the beginning. Jessica replied faster than I expected. Actually, way faster. Less than 20 minutes after Adrian's first message, she was already asking questions. So, what brings you to Seattle? The funny part? Adrian wasn't even in Seattle, at least according to the story I'd built. He was supposedly spending the week in Miami before flying to New York for a business conference. That was intentional. People with money are always traveling, or at least that's what Jessica believed. I waited until the next morning to answer. One thing I'd learned from watching Ryan and Jessica's messages was this. Desperate people reply instantly. Confident people don't. So Adrian didn't. When I finally responded, it was short. Business mostly. Seattle's just one of several places I invest in. A few minutes later, typing, that sounds exciting. Then another message. What kind of investments? I smiled. Jessica wasn't talking to a man anymore. She was interviewing an opportunity. Over the next 3 weeks, our conversations stayed surprisingly innocent. We never flirted directly. That was important. If Adrian came on too strong, she'd get suspicious. Instead, he listened. He asked about her hobbies, her favorite restaurants, her dream vacations. He remembered little details. He'd say things like, "Didn't you mention your dog had surgery last year?" Or, "I hope your meeting went well today." Little things that made Jessica feel seen. Ironically, exactly the way she used to make me feel. Then one evening, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So what do you actually do?" I sent a voice message. Not my voice. I'd used an AI voice tool to create a calm, confident male voice with a slight East Coast accent. It wasn't robotic. It sounded real enough that even I forgot it wasn't a real person. The message was only 15 seconds long. Mostly technology investments. I sold my first company years ago. Now I spend more time deciding what not to invest in. Jessica listened to it. 5 times. I know because the app showed how many times the audio had been played. 5. Then came the response. "Wow, that's impressive." No, that wasn't what she meant. What she meant was, "How much money do you have?" About a week later, Ryan mentioned something during dinner. "Jessica's been acting weird lately." I kept my eyes on my plate. "Oh?" "She's always smiling at her phone." I shrugged. "Maybe she's seeing someone." He frowned. "She says she's not." I almost laughed. The irony was incredible. The woman he'd cheated with was now hiding something from him. He had no clue. Neither of them did. As the weeks passed, Jessica became obsessed. She started posting completely different photos online. Gone were the casual selfies. Now everything looked expensive. She visited rooftop bars she'd never cared about before. She started wearing designer brands, or at least brands that looked expensive. One afternoon, she even texted me out of nowhere. "Emily, random question. Do you know any good cosmetic dentists?" I stared at the message. "Why?" "Thinking about veneers, LOL." Veneers? Jessica had never mentioned veneers in 20 years. A few days later, she asked another question. Do you know where I could get luxury dresses without paying full price? Then, what perfume do rich women wear? Then, is Rolex better than Cartier? I answered everything as naturally as possible. Inside, I was watching the trap close. One Saturday afternoon, she invited me shopping. I almost said no. Then I realized I wanted to see this with my own eyes. She spent nearly $3,000 that day on one shopping trip, a designer handbag, 2 dresses, high heels, jewelry, perfume. She put almost all of it on a credit card. I knew she couldn't afford it. She made maybe $65,000 a year. As we walked back to the parking garage, I casually asked, "Big date?" She tried to hide her smile. "Maybe." "Oh, it's nothing." I looked at her. "You've been glowing lately." She laughed. "I just think life is about to change." She had no idea how right she was. That evening, Adrian sent her one simple message. "I'm flying to Seattle next month. Maybe we should finally have dinner." She answered in less than 30 seconds. "I'd love that." Exactly 7 minutes later, Ryan called me. "Have you talked to Jessica today?" I pretended to think. "Not really. Why?" "I think she's avoiding me." I looked out the window. The rain tapped softly against the glass. Then I said the most truthful lie I'd told in weeks. "Maybe she's just found something money better." There was a long silence on the other end, and for the first time since my marriage fell apart, I realized Ryan was starting to panic. The moment Adrian asked Jessica to dinner, everything changed. Not for me, for Ryan. At first it was little things. Jessica stopped answering his texts right away, then she started canceling plans. She suddenly had girls' nights, work events, family dinners. Every excuse she had once used on me, she was now using on him. I would have felt sorry for Ryan if I hadn't remembered every lie he'd told me. One evening, he came home looking exhausted. We were still living together while the divorce paperwork was being finalized. Neither of us wanted the legal mess of moving out too early. Most nights we barely spoke. But that night, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and rubbed his face. "I think Jessica's pulling away." I looked up from my laptop. "Oh? I don't know." He sighed. "She just feels different." I almost laughed. Different. That was exactly the word I'd used to describe him months earlier. Funny how life works. He stared at his coffee. "Do you think she's seeing someone else?" There it was. Fear. Real fear. I shrugged. "I couldn't tell you." He nodded slowly. "I guess I deserve that." For a split second, I almost believed he felt guilty. Then he added, "I just don't understand why she'd do this." That tiny sentence erased every ounce of sympathy I had. He still saw himself as the victim. A week later, Jessica officially ended things with him. I didn't hear it from Ryan. I heard it from Jessica herself. She called me out of nowhere, crying, or at least pretending to cry. "Emily, can we talk?" I agreed to meet her. Part of me wanted to hear how she'd explain all this. We met at the same coffee shop where she'd once told me she wanted a millionaire. She looked nervous, excited, scared, all at once. After a few minutes of awkward silence, she finally spoke. "I think I met someone." I tilted my head. "Oh?" She smiled. "It just happened." "When?" "A few weeks ago." "Interesting. That matched Adrian's timeline perfectly." She kept talking. "He's unlike anyone I've ever met. Kind. Successful. Confident. I've never connected with someone like this." I stirred my coffee. "What about Ryan?" She looked away. "I ended it." "Just like that?" She nodded. It wasn't fair to keep leading him on. The irony almost made me choke. Leading him on? She'd spent months helping destroy my marriage. Now suddenly she cared about fairness? Then she leaned closer. "I haven't told anyone this." I smiled politely. "You can tell me." I think She lowered her voice. I think he's going to propose. I nearly dropped my cup. Propose? We hadn't even implied marriage, not once. Jessica had built an entire fantasy in her own head. When did you even meet him? I asked. We've been talking every day. So you've seen each other? Not yet. I blinked. So, you've never met him? She shook her head. But I know he's real. Of course she did. He sent me flowers. True, I had. Using an online florist. He bought me a necklace. Also true, it wasn't expensive. Just convincing. He says I'm different from every other woman. I smiled. I'm happy for you. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I knew you'd understand. If only she knew. Over the next month, Jessica transformed into someone I barely recognized. She quit her job. She said she wanted more freedom. Ryan later told me she'd claimed Adrian wanted her available to travel. Then she traded in her perfectly reliable Honda for a luxury SUV she absolutely couldn't afford. Credit. Of course, designer luggage arrived at her apartment. New clothes, jewelry, even a set of expensive suitcases. She wasn't preparing for a vacation. She was preparing for a new life. Meanwhile, Ryan completely unraveled. He called me more than he'd called me during our entire marriage. Not because he loved me, because he was lonely. One night, he showed up at the house with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. I figured we could eat together. I hesitated, then let him in. Halfway through dinner, he looked at me. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I stayed quiet. I threw away everything. Still, I said nothing. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I don't expect forgiveness. Another pause. But if there's even a tiny chance... There isn't, I interrupted. He froze. I looked him straight in the eyes. The day you chose her, you stopped being my husband. Silence. Then something I never expected happened. He started crying. Real tears, not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet regret. Months earlier, I would have cried with him. Now, I simply watched, because by then, my heart had already moved on. 3 days later, Adrian sent Jessica the message she'd been waiting for. My meeting in Seattle has been moved. Why don't you fly to Miami instead? Outside of you. Jessica spent the next 2 days acting like she'd won the lottery. She posted vague Instagram stories with captions like, "Big things are coming." Sometimes life rewards those who take risks. She even uploaded a picture of a brand new suitcase with a tiny airplane emoji. Everyone assumed she was going on vacation. Only I knew the truth. The night before her flight, Adrian sent one final message. My assistant booked you a table at La Mer tomorrow, 7 p.m. Wear something elegant. I can't wait to finally meet you. Jessica replied almost instantly. I'll be there. The next afternoon, she flew to Miami. I spent the entire day trying to convince myself not to think about it. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. At exactly 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. Jessica had posted a selfie. She looked stunning. A black dress, perfect makeup, diamond necklace. The caption simply said, "Wish me luck." Then, nothing. At 7:25 p.m., Adrian's account stopped replying. At 7:40 p.m., it disappeared. Deleted. Every message, every photo, every trace. Gone. I imagined Jessica sitting alone at that restaurant, checking her phone over and over, telling herself he was just running late. Then the panic would set in. Around 9 p.m., my own phone started ringing. Jessica. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. Then came the text. Emily, please answer. Something's wrong. I think I've been scammed. I looked at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed just one message. Sometimes the people we trust the most aren't who they pretend to be. I hit send. Blocked her number. That was the last conversation we ever had. A few weeks later, I heard everything through mutual friends. Jessica had quit her job for a future that never existed. She'd maxed out her credit cards buying clothes, jewelry, and luggage. She'd taken out a personal loan. Ryan refused to take her back after realizing she'd left him for someone wealthier. Within a few months, she had moved back in with her parents. As for Ryan, he called me one last time. "I know I don't deserve another chance," he said. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." This time, I believed him. But believing someone is sorry doesn't mean you owe them forgiveness. I wished him well and hung up. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. I finalized the divorce, started my own interior design studio, moved into a smaller house that actually felt like home. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful. People sometimes ask me if I was the one behind the mysterious millionaire. I always smile and tell them the truth. I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe karma found Jessica. Maybe she created her own downfall. Or maybe some lessons are too expensive to learn any other way. Either way, I didn't get my husband back. I got something much more valuable. My self-respect. And if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's this: never chase the people who choose to betray you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's letting them destroy themselves while you quietly build a better life. The end.